When I was first exploring financial minimalism, I didn't really have a budget, a way to plan expenses, or even a goal. I guess the only rule I really had for myself was to buy less, thus saving more. Pretty straightforward, and ultimately, this did work for a while. But I knew that there was a way to budget frugally without depriving myself or cutting any corners. I've always been pretty frugal, ever since my first job. I don't come from a wealthy background, and I'm actually sort of glad for that. And I feel like this gives me a different perspective of how I look at money that I earn and what I decide to do with it. Don't get me wrong, I did still go out and buy tattoos when I was 17 before I even had a bank account, but don't judge me for not having my priorities straight at 17. I feel very passionate about budgeting, finance, and especially if I can help others do it. However, every time I make a video about finance, I feel that it's very much worth mentioning that I am by no means a financial expert. I only ever share what I do, hoping that someone out there can gain some value out of it. Being a minimalist goes hand in hand with being frugal, so a lot of this did come with being a minimalist. However, I made it a point to list things that I think can help absolutely anyone when it comes to budgeting, minimalist or not. These are ways that I budget as a minimalist. But first, if you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. Here we talk about minimalism, frugal living, and things of that nature. So if that sounds good to you and you end up liking the video, be sure to like and consider subscribing. Let's get started. The first thing I like to do is have a visual representation of my expenses. And I do this because it's a very easy way for me to identify exactly where my money is going. More specifically, organize my financial priorities. And when I say organize financial priorities, I mean that this is a great opportunity to cut back on some expenses that I might find unnecessary. I can budget in my head all I want, but there's something about seeing everything written down in front of me that just makes it a lot easier to manage, keeping me more motivated and accountable for reaching those financial goals. And I'll be honest, this is pretty scary to do at first. Oftentimes, this is exactly the part where a lot of us have to come face to face with any debt we might have. But it is an important first step that I took when it came to budgeting more frugally. Spend less than I make. Now, this is incredibly obvious, but also incredibly easy to overlook. Part of this is realizing the difference between my wants and my needs. Spending more than I make in a month digs a financial hole that might take a long time to get out of. There are a lot of apps out there that helps you track your spending by month. Luckily, my bank account app does this by default. At the end of every month, it tells me exactly what was deposited into my account and what was withdrawn. And before I stuck to my specific budgeting, I found that I was almost breaking even every single month. The two main ways to fix this were to increase my income or lower my monthly spending, which I knew I could do. I forgot what the exact term is called, but there is this behavior that exists that when one starts making more money, they naturally just start spending more money to sort of balance it out. And I know that I've experienced this firsthand. It never seemed to matter the job or the pay. My bank account always looked exactly the same because my spending was just adjusting to whatever I was making at the time. And the point of this is actually really simple. Just start living below my means. Round up expenses. And this is a super easy budgeting habit that I've done since the very beginning. For example, if a certain bill ends in 5, I'll just round it up to the nearest 10th when planning for that expense. And somewhat of a side note for this one, I also lowball my income the same way. Just like I round up my expense to the nearest 10th, I round down my income to the nearest 10th. Doing this, I'm sort of creating a buffer space that always keeps me ahead of my expenses and more prepared for a scenario where I made less than I planned and my bills are more than I expected. Most of my monthly bills don't fluctuate, but I always still round them up when budgeting. I'd always rather have a few more dollars set aside than I actually need than be unprepared and cut it too close. By doing this, I usually end up with a few more dollars at the end of every month and just a little bit more breathing room. change the due dates of bills. And this is something I like to do for my own convenience more than anything. Some of my bills are on random dates throughout the month. Although I get paid on consistent days as well, I don't really like to have bills in between my paydays, if that makes any sense. In the past, I've been able to request new due dates for credit cards and even phone bills. Typically, I've been able to do this right through the app I made the payment on. The real benefit of this is being able to pay everything that I have to on one specific day of the month and not have to deal with it until next month, rather than have to pay something and remember to pay something else the very next week. I know that setting up automatic payments would make me not have to do this, but more recently I prefer to do my payments manually. I've set aside one specific day of the month where I sit and pay all my bills on that day. By doing this, I reduce my chances of possibly forgetting to pay a certain bill, and overall, I just stress about it a lot less. If I know that everything I have to pay is due on the 25th of every month, the day I have dedicated to paying my bills would be on the 20th. By doing this, I know that I'll stay ahead, and it gives me a few buffer days to allow everything to transact. And the last thing here is focus on value over price. One specific thing about minimalism that I preach is buying quality over quantity. It might seem contradicting at first that spending more money on a higher quality item rather than its cheaper counterpart, it might just seem to not make financial sense at first. Buying the item of higher quality has saved me money, time, and frustration in certain instances. A great example is this new external hard drive that I recently purchased. I knew that I really wanted and needed this, but I hesitated because of the price tag. However, I knew that by going with the cheaper option, like less storage and going for a hard drive instead of an SSD, I'd probably have to replace it much sooner down the road. The idea is that I want to own things that I know I'll get a lot of use out of, and they won't need to be replaced anytime soon. Saving time and money has been the direct result of focusing on value rather than price. It should go without saying that everyone's budget is going to look drastically different based on their income, expenses, and wants and needs. So take what you can from this and just implement whatever makes the most sense for you. As always, I appreciate your time watching, and I hope you got a little bit of value out of this video. If you did enjoy this video and you do like this type of content, be sure to like and consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you next time.